Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell. You know what time it is. It is 8 a.m. Eastern, Saturday morning, and time for another episode of Sales Logic. Listen, for those of you viewing the show, I got to apologize today. I arrived early at a coffee shop, thought I'd be in a great setting, but coffee shop doesn't open till 8 o'clock. So here I am in my car, ready to do the show.
Well, it's 7 a.m. here in Central Time. So, what the heck? But it just proves that we have the show no matter what. Great show today. We're going to be talking about how do you get to the right decision maker? That's the topic. That's the show.
Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell. Again, welcome back to Sales Logic. Now, before Mark dives into the topic for today, I love to tell you how the show works because the show is about one person, you, the audience. That's right. We feature you every week here. So if you've got a question, if there's something we can do to help you make your sales goals, send the question right here to us at saleslogicpodcast.com. And if you love the show, please subscribe, write a comment, write a review, and always think about joining the Sales Logic Mastermind. All right, Mark, I am excited about this topic. Let's dive in.
Yeah, because it's all about getting to the right decision maker. Now, you and I, we struggle like this with just like everybody else. We got a great question. I'll get to that in a bit, but what are your thoughts? What are some techniques that you use to make sure that you're dealing with the right decision maker versus the happy talk person?
I think this has become really more challenging in today's marketplace. I'm finding it far more difficult in my business to find the right decision maker. I think one of the biggest reasons is because there isn't one decision maker anymore. It's a multiple decision maker approach that we've got to go after. So I think one of the most important, I think you have got to start by figuring out who the ideal client is. I mean, really, are you even approaching the right company, and what is the best way into that? Like I think about in today's marketplace, so interesting. I was just working on a strategy yesterday. Let's take speaking engagements, which is a part of my business. We're starting with the meeting planner, but not believing that the meeting planner is the ultimate decision maker. So I would say my first strategy is figure out step one just to at least get through the door.
See, what you brought up is so valuable. Multiple people are involved in every decision. And many times, like you said, the meeting planner for what you're doing, many times the person we're initially talking to is just the user or the implementer, but they're not the ones that make the decision and hold the money. And that's the challenge. This is why we've got to create more relationships than ever. And it goes back to another thing that you said. You got to be clear as to who you're going after because you're going to be dealing with more contacts, because it's going to take more steps. You can't afford to waste your time on things that just aren't in your wheelhouse. You have to stay focused. Getting to the right decision maker is also just getting past the door, the doorkeeper, and I like to say it's the door opener. I mean, and this is a challenge right there, which means you got to be bringing value right from the start.
Yeah, and I think that's really where you need to start is that while relationships are incredibly important, I mean, if Mark knows somebody and I want to make a connection, he can definitely open the door for me. But I think the other piece of it is you have to understand what problems you're solving. If the most precious thing in today's marketplace, other than bottom line results, is time. And it isn't that people are being rude. It isn't that they don't want to give you their time. They're basically saying, why would this be worth it to me? And so you have to, if you want to get to the decision maker, your approach needs to be by solving a problem that they have.
Which means oftentimes you have to be seen ahead of time as being able to solve problems. This whole awareness piece, this whole reputation is absolutely key. And again, this is why you've got to stay very tight in your space. It's either you or your company, but having that reputation. I love John's comment, multi-layered decision makers with additional levels of influencers. That's so true. A question I love asking anytime I'm in front of somebody, how have you made decisions like this in the past? And I love asking, that's kind of a neutral question, But I love hearing what they say. Well, we have to get this person involved or that person involved. And that, okay, what is that? That means my radar is going up that this person is not the ultimate decision maker. We've got to be willing to ask tough questions early on.
Yeah, and I think rather than going over the decision maker that is less influence, I think you need to help that decision maker look good in front of the next decision maker. You have to teach and help that decision maker um, position you and do it in a way that allows them to remain in some level of control, and not just jump over when you find out they don't have all the authority.
Which leads to a couple more questions you need to be asking. Hey, how does this fit into your objectives? How is this going to help you succeed? What can I do to help you in this? Because again, it's you, the person. If we don't elevate that person who we're speaking to, we don't have any right to go to the next person, because many times the most difficult conversation is not the one we're having with them. It's the conversation they're going to have with somebody else. And, as much as we want to be part of it, we may not be part of that conversation.
Yeah, I love what Natalie's saying here. Natalie, would love that you show up every week. You need to make it easy for the initial contact to save time and help them provide a solution and make them look good. I just had a really big, contract come through, and I really believed for the majority of it, I was talking to the decision maker, and she believed I was talking to the decision maker. But at the end of the day, it got out of her hands and went to the CEO. And so even in the middle of the call, we had to switch gears, but we worked together as partners to work with the CEO, and it went incredibly well, because the CEO actually wanted to choose one of my competitors, but we stayed in touch, and I worked, and I really think I got that because I worked with the lower level decision maker and kept them engaged in the entire process, and my competitor jumped over them.
And I'll tell you what, that's so key. But you were very keen and stayed focused on helping them with their next steps. I'm going through kind of the same thing right now, working with a person, and without doubt, boy, unbelievable. Set me up with some other meetings with people in the company, came back to me the other day, said, we're good. I've got to get this letter of understanding signed off by the COO and the CEO, and it will eventually go to the procurement department. Well, naturally, I want to have a conversation. Let's talk about the COO. Let's talk about the CEO. Let's talk about the procurement department. And I was able to have a great conversation with him, because he was a little bit, I feel very good about this, but am I going to absolutely succeed? And it's a matter of helping him. And you've got to be willing to go to bat with these people, because again, you want to be part of the conversation, but you can't always be there. It's just one of those natures. Yes.
Yeah, spot on, Dave Sanderson. You said it so much better than I did. Basically, what I did in that situation was developed a coach, and having a coach and an account is key. Mark, I've got a question, for any of our listeners. How do you find how do you even begin? Like, where do you begin to find a decision maker?
Well, what I find is many times you got to create multiple contacts. You got to be willing to touch multiple people in an organization to see who responds, who comes back. But then I'm going to be asking them the questions. Hey, what are the objectives on your radar screen? What is it that you're trying to do? How is what we're talking about going to help you? How have you made decisions like this in the past? What are some of the criteria that you've used to try to solve this problem before? I love asking questions like that. And I'm going to ask questions like that across the organization and people, because I'm listening. Because again, I want a coach, but I also want a champion, because a coach is going to help advise you. And that's great. I want coaches. The champion is going to go to bat for you. Go back to this company I was talking about the other day. This gentleman that I've been working with, he has turned now into my champion, because he is absolutely adamant about getting the COO and the CEO to sign off on this. And that's what you want. Somebody who's going to go to bat because they see ownership in it themselves, how it's going to benefit them.
Yeah, I love that. I love what Natalie is saying here. Ask who is involved in this decision-making process. That is such a good question. How many other providers, companies are you considering? Get the lay of the land, so you really get a good feel for what they're looking for. So, for anybody who's struggling to decide how to go into a company, I mean, I think one of the number one things you need to look at is your own performance in the last year. Who was the main point of contact that you worked with? Like, I always reach out to meeting planners, but the truth is, when I looked back over my own portfolio, the majority of the work that I did in the last year, I worked directly with a C-suite professional. So now we completely changed how we're making our initial contact into the company. Now we get passed to the meeting planner, but going in through the meeting planner has not been the most effective for us.
See, that's because that meeting planner is the implementer. They're the
Right.
implementer. They may own it once the decision is made, but they don't make the decision. That's absolutely key. And that really kind of hits back to the question that came to us this week from Lorenzo in San Francisco. He says, I've been working in insurance sales for more than 15 years, getting harder and harder to get to the right person. I ask people to talk to who make decisions. But I seem to hit walls. What am I doing? And it really comes down to, because I threw that in the brain and it came back. One of the things is, are you prospecting or are you selling? See, in other words, prospecting, are you developing the names of who you should be? But are you selling? Are you truly bringing value to them? Other thing piece is building relationships. Many times in these complex sales, you've seen this, I've seen this, it takes time because there's so many people involved, but you can't lose sight. And remember, the decision is going to be made on their timetable, not your timetable.
Yeah. Charles, welcome. Welcome to the program. Charles says, whatever you are selling must align with an organization's goals and make sense at the right time. That starts with knowing what the company does and the pain points they are having. Does your research fit? So well said. I think the other thing that's important in getting to decision makers that's very different than when I started out in sales is you have got to be positioned as an expert. I'm working with a company right now on their sales strategy. And one of the biggest pieces of that we're developing is creating their ability to be an influencer in the marketplace. So that before the salespeople ever try to get through the door to the decision maker, people have heard of them and they have heard about them.
See, that's so key, because do they see you as having authority and having credibility? And that is so key, because if you don't, you're not going to be there. I put together a document, and it came out of some work I was doing of 40 different strategies and techniques for a very specific cause. And I sent it out to a number of different companies that I'm prospecting. Sure enough, I got responses back from several of them. Several of them said, hey, we need to talk. We need to have a conversation. I was establishing authority. I was establishing credibility, which is now getting me in the door. Is that going to keep me in the door? No. I got to be able to reinforce, but at least that gets me in the door. And more importantly, it gets me in the door far enough up so it's not with the implementer, it's not with the user, but it is much more closely aligned with potentially the decision maker. Lead with authority, create credibility.
Yeah, I also think it's a great time too that, if it's, like Lorenzo, things are stale, they're not working. Go back to some of your best clients, the ones that you've already sold to, and do a little information tour. Talk to them about, say, obviously the landscape is changing. It's harder for me to get to decision makers. Help me understand the challenges in your business. Help me understand what would make you give somebody like me time, and get the information, understand how to redesign your approach to get to the decision maker by talking to decision makers and getting it straight from them as to what is shifting and what is changing.
Yeah, and one of the ways you do that is by finding out, do you have a coach or a champion? That was a question that came in. This is one of the reasons I love asking, how have you made decisions like this in the past? I'm listening for names, I'm listening for other people that they're talking to. And I go, what's your relationship with them? How have those meetings gone? Talk to me about a situation that you were successfully able to push through and get installed. In other words, and I love doing this early on in a conversation, because what I'm listening for is I'm listening for words that kind of, or descriptive words that have, you know what? I try to get these people to do this. I try to get no, that means they're at best a coach. No, I go in and I lay out the budget. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. And I just need to get their sign off on it. That's much more closer to a champion. So I'm listening to the vocabulary and
Great
what they've
point.
done in the past. That is absolutely key on any kind of a complex deal.
Yeah, I love what John is saying here. He said the goal of the initial decision makers may not clearly align with the goal of the ultimate decision maker. That is gold right there. And I'm going to add to that, John, that it's not only the goal, but it's also the fears and the worries. For this deal that I closed, being that I'm a smaller organization, they weren't sure whether I could handle the capacity. Now, my initial decision maker had no level. He'd worked with me before he knew. But when I got in there and Mark said, listen, 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 you hear where the problem is. And once you know that, you can basically, you can get over the hump. But I want to continue with this idea of getting to the decision maker. We talked about being an authority. We talked about leveraging your network. We talked about solving the actual problem, understanding really what that is. The other is to take a multi-level approach, to come at this from a lot of different directions, take a breath, and be patient. You may try a cold call. You may connect with them on LinkedIn. You may show up where they go at a meeting or an event. You may work your network to look to see who knows them. How can you connect with them? But having a multi-level approach, you don't know what they're going to respond to.
And that means you're going to have to be patient. It's going to take time. And again, this comes back to what you said very early on, Mary, so spot on. You got to stay focused, stay in your wheelhouse with businesses and companies and organizations that you can serve, because otherwise you're just shooting into the air. And here's what I found. Many times I might be reaching out to somebody, I'm trying to get into a company, trying to get in, and I'm touching different things. Nothing ever happens. But what happens is one of those people winds up going to another company, going somewhere else. And then and suddenly the work that you did over there that never materialized helps you get in the door somewhere else. So don't think your attempts are all in vain. Many times it just takes time. Yeah. Two things that I want to add to this here, and that is you've got to be able to set your calendar to have a repetitive process in place. Because if you don't have a repetitive process in place, you're never going to be. What I see so many salespeople doing is they're going after these bigger opportunities. They're trying to find the right decision maker, and they just randomly fire. No, you got to have a cadence that's absolutely dead on. And depending on the company, that may be every couple of days. It may be every week. It's going to vary, but you've got to be consistent. Consistency sells. Consistency works.
Yeah, I thought that you would like to see this. This says Mark is right. Now Charles, you are Mark's new favorite listener. It takes time and decision makers to make decisions. They do it on their own time. Don't press. You are not controlling the buying cycle. But think about this. I mean, if you were the decision maker and I reached out to you and you never heard of me, why would you respond, even if I was solving the most important problem? Because I'm not a known entity. So I think one of the most important things that you need to focus on to be a decision maker is how do you become a known entity in the circle to which your decision maker is looking. And that can be by coming through another decision maker. It can come by being, on podcasts or articles. It can come by, showing up at the same golf course or the same, conference they go to. But you've got to realize they've got to get warmed up to you if they're going to give you their time.
And that means keeping a tight circle. And of course, right here, Charles, let me get that comment up there. You're his favorite fan too, because he says, right. You're right too, Meridith. So it's equal time for both people. But here's the whole thing. This comes back to this whole thing. You got to know the space that you play in. You got to know the space you play in. And what is the level of authority? What is the level of knowledge? What is the level of insight you can bring? Again, this isn't a spray and pray world. That's not going to work. You have to remain tight, remain focused. Here's one of the easiest ways that I found is once I'm in with one organization, I'm gonna look at who are their competitors, who are the other players, and I'm going to immediately start reaching out to them. In other words, you build your marketplace based off of who you're having traction with right now. Because many times what happens is you're going to get knowledge from one company that's going to help you with that. Now, I'm not saying to share competitive knowledge. No. I absolutely respect. Never do that. But you're going to understand what's the vocabulary, what's the language, what are the things, what are the challenges, and do it. And of course, that's where AI comes into play. AI is an incredibly valuable tool to be able to help give you knowledge and bring you up to speed.
Yeah, so well said. You know, the other thing I think in today's marketplace is getting to the decision maker again has become more challenging. But once you get that opportunity, really respect it. You have worked so hard to get there. Go in prepared, go in knowledgeable, go in ready to over deliver. Go in showing that you have done your homework. Go in ready to listen and go in ready with ideas and solutions. And then, by God, before you finish that call, make sure you schedule the next one. Because if you do not, you are making getting back through the door to the decision maker so much harder than it has to be.
That's a very simple concept. Bam, fam.
Mhm.
Bam, fam. Book a meeting from a meeting. Because, whenever you're in a meeting, you automatically book that next meeting. But what does this come down to? You got to be willing to do the work. And this
Yeah.
is where I find so many salespeople. They take a couple stabs at something. Oh, nobody responded. So I give up. Hey, if this is an opportunity where you know you can help the company, you owe it to them to stay in the game. And it may take you a long time. I've had plenty of that have taken months and months and months to get in, multiple contacts, but you've got to stay in the game. And you're staying in the game because you know you're bringing value and you know you can help them. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I love what John is saying here, that he likes to research who might be the decision makers' external influencers. That's so well said. You may have you may have a connection there. Renee, I love this question. Do people still answer cold calls? It seems like magnetic marketing is the way to go today. Mark, what do you think?
I think they do. It all depends on the time. Now, again, you're not going to get high percentages. I totally get that. But when I match cold calls up with emails, with other messaging and so forth, I eventually do break through. It's a long process, and I'm not going to waste cold call cycles on people who I do not actively believe that I can help. In other words, it really isn't a cold call. It's a warm call because I vetted you and I know you, and I'm going to be reaching out to you. Friday
Yeah.
afternoons, great time to call people. It's amazing how many people answer the phone.
Yeah, Renee, I'm going to say, I don't think they do very often, but I could care less. And the reason I could care less is because it's another touch point. When I can leave something in your voicemail and I can give a little bit of energy and then I can follow up with an email, it's another point of visibility. I just landed a deal for May that I've probably been cold calling this person, I don't know, 3 years. She's never answered one thing ever. But I was in front of her. She knew who I was and she knew what I had to offer. So when she had an opportunity, she called me. All right, Mark, it is time for the book. Would you say?
It is time for the book. And I did a little switch here because this has been a great conversation. Selling to Big Companies by Jill Conrath. She's got so many strategies in there as to how to get past that gatekeeper, how to create multiple levels and so forth. But it's Selling to Big Companies by Jill Conrath. I know you've read it. You know Jill. She's great.
Jill Conrath is just a legend in the industry.
Yeah.
And it is a great book. And it really focuses on how to get to the decision maker. All right, Mark, what's up on the lightning
round? 10 worst mistakes you can make in sales.
Oh my gosh, do we have to limit it to 10? 10 worst mistakes you can make in sales. Number 1, not being consistent.
You stole that from me. Number 2, not having a plan.
Number 3, not getting clear on your ideal customer profile.
Number 4, not staying focused with bringing relative value in every message, every contact you make.
Number 5, not following up.
Number 6, not staying in the game, or I should say, staying in the game and jumping to price too quickly. Never put price on the table until you really understand what's the need the customer has.
Number 7, this is the cardinal, the big one, talking too much and not listening enough.
Number 8, believing you can solve the world's problems. You can't. You've got to be able to just sit there and listen. Picks up on what you just said.
Well, I'm going to go with number 9. There's so many more I could list, but just because to go with the theme of today's show is failing to recognize who really is the decision maker.
Ooh, I love that. Number 10, not having a CRM system or
Ah,
having a CRM system and not using
not
it.
using it.
Hello, hello, hello. Anyway,
That's
hey,
awesome.
great show. We got Sales Logic Expert Exchange
I
coming up with
know.
Tiffany Bova here. So registration link, we'll get that out for you. That's coming up. Absolutely outstanding. But with that, we want to say thank you for listening to Sales Logic this week. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. Something we've said has earned you a single dollar. Consider telling a friend about our show because it's how we grow when we help you grow. I'm Mark Hunter.
And I'm Meridith Elliott, Powell.
Remember, when you sell with confidence and integrity,
All of this uncertainty suddenly becomes your competitive advantage.
and the sale becomes logical.
All right. Mark your calendars right now for Tuesday, February 25th, Sales Logic Expert Exchange, Tiffany Bova, one you do not want to miss. Think about, subscribing to this show. Think about leaving us a review. And listen, if you want to exceed your sales goals this year, 2025, your best year on record, think about joining the Sales Logic Mastermind. All right. We'll see you right back here next week. Love our audience. You all are amazing. Thank you for your participation. We'll see you right back here next week, 8 a.m. Eastern, for another episode of Sales Logic.